All right. The biggest threat to America right now is boomers, greedy corporations, and illegal immigration. All right. And it's not that hard to understand. I'll dumb it down for everyone. So, the way businesses and the market works is they have to keep increasing their profits, right? For whatever reason. I don't understand why companies have to have an increased profit year after year. Um, if if you have a good business, you should be okay with the same profits year after year. But it's these greedy corporations that push and push and push just for increased profits to make their shareholders happy, or to you know so they can gamble in the stock markets and prove, oh yeah, our company's growing. Who cares about if it's growing? If you make a good product and you keep it the same, you'll have a great company. And you can put those profits or that increased growth just off of you making a good product, and you can pass it down to your employees. All right. And these philosophies have been the same since the beginning of time. Okay. It's like the 10 Commandments. You don't want to be greedy. You want to, give sacrifices to the Lord, which is pretty much, back in biblical times, they would, you know, let's say a farmer would have 100 cows, right? Well, every so often they would sacrifice, 20 of the cows or 50 of the cows, and they'd have a big feast and give it back to the people. And that was kind of like showing thanks to God. It made everybody happy. It kept people honest. It made them not greedy. But today it's the opposite. Every little profit that any company has, they want to save it. They don't want to put it back into the company. They want to invest it in the stock market or pay their elite corporate people bigger salaries or pocket it or whatever. And so the issue is companies, this has been happening for, at least the past 100 years. And eventually there isn't any more profits to be squeezed out of a said company. So what do? They start making whatever they use cheaper. All right. We went from everything being made in America, good quality, heavy machinery. And then they come out with, all right, let's use half of the metal. Let's see if we can get the job with half the metal. Then we get double the profits, and it makes sense in some instances. If you don't need a lot or whatever, it's whatever. Yeah, that's a decent cut. But when you keep on skinning the cat to where there's no more skin left, you're destroying your company. You're going in a 360. And so what they've done is they've gone from our machines made in America, with heavy duty, built to last forever, and then they want to make it half of, the steel used. And then they get this idea, okay, let's train these, for lack of better words, peasants in China or Vietnam, to make the same machinery, but for half the cost. So then it's the same kind of scheme. They go to Vietnam to make it for half the cost. Then they go to China for half of that cost. And then not only that, they make it with lesser metal, lesser material. And then they come out with, oh, well, let's try aluminum. Oh, aluminum is actually stronger than steel. Now, what kind of an idiot would believe that? Okay, anybody that knows has any common sense knows that's a scam. Okay, aluminum is not stronger than steel. Okay, it is a scam. Anything that comes out that they're advertising, oh, it's a better way. Oh, it's made with new technology. That is them screaming, we cut costs. Okay, and it's across the board. So then what else do? They go in every different avenue. They're like, okay, um, our workers, how do we like pay them less to increase profits? All right. So first, they cut pensions. All right. So pensions, that's kind of like a sacrifice. That's a good thing. It was a sacrifice to their employees, it is an anti-greed kind of system where they give back to their employees like the biblical times. Then, well, pensions are kind of expensive. We can't, blah, blah, blah. So then they cut the pensions away. It's the old bait and switch. All right. Now these, and it's all done modernly by boomers. They're like, oh, we got our pension. So screw our kids. They don't need pensions. We didn't even really need them. So what do they need them for? Yeah, let's cut those. They'll still want to have to get a job. We'll make profit for the meantime. And then we'll find out any other way to cut costs. It's a humongous greed cesspool. And it's disgusting. It's completely disgusting. All right. So at the same time, all this extra money, it's taxes are being increased. So you want more and more money. So they're taking more of this extra profit. They're spending it on these, pretty much the downfall of America. They're spending it on illegal immigrants, so they can support them. Because who's going to be able to live in this kind of economy without assistance? Especially straight off the boat. Like, Americans can barely even make it. So how are these people going to make it? It's because they give them assistance. All right, they give them free housing, free healthcare, free food, and a lot of times free money, and they get free college. All right, all these people, they get free college. And what's funny is when I was in college, they had a grant program, right, for everyone. And at one point in the class, the teacher announced, she was like, hey, the grant that we offer, nobody's applied for it. So if you guys want to apply for it, go ahead and do it, because we, somebody's going to get it. And it's funny, this white girl rose her hand. You could tell she was a stellar student. And she was like, well, I applied for this. Why is it being announced? Why didn't I get it? And the teacher was just kind of like confused, like, and then she was like, well, actually, I think they tend to award the grant to like a minority. I think that's kind of what they usually do, or something like that. And so, like, to me, I was like taken back. I was like, what does this world come to? I was like, you got a stellar student here that works her butt off, really smart, great grades, is applying to grants, probably applying to colleges, doing all this work herself, paying for it all. And those are the people that grants are for, an American that works hard. And she wasn't even looked at. They wanted to give it to an illegal immigrant or minority peasant, okay, that didn't even apply. They got to push them into applying to get a free education, which they probably all already got free educations. And so that right there showed me a lot about the school system and how corrupt they are and how they manipulate all these old systems into benefiting our downfall and illegal immigration. So on top of that, their trade-off is all for corporate greed. Is they don't have anywhere else to cut costs, okay? I make fun of, things in my my own field. We use a lot of equipment, and they've came out with the cheapest stuff year after year. And I tell people, I'm like, yeah, one day, these nebulizers, they're going to be made out of paper, and we're going to be trying to use them, and they're like falling apart as we use them, and they're like, well, it's like the new nebulizer. Yeah, it's supposed to be better, like even though they don't work, they don't function right, it's not even safe. But who cares about safety? It's all about profits. These greedy people. And something needs to be done. All right? And back to the illegal immigrants, is that's their next skinning of the cat, is these illegal immigrations. That's why Trump, you know, kind of stopped with the illegal immigrants, because he found out that there isn't any more cutting costs. We have all of our companies overseas. They're all skinned to the T, where they're making, the cheapest metal, the cheapest material, and the prices that we're getting them for, we can barely make profits with what they are. We can't get them any cheaper from any other country. And we're way too far gone to make it here. And so what do? They bring in these people, pretty much slaves. They bring in slaves here from all over the place. And especially in my field, is these people come in, they're almost like paid to be here, given free everything. And then they give them, pretty much entry level pay. All right? And they're completely fine with it. Why? Because everything else is free for them. And you got to think, oh, well, they still pay taxes. Not their grandma who's fresh off the boat. Not their, wife that sits at home just multiplying 100 kids, with their free daycare grandma and cousins and who else there to have a really great life for their kids. Meanwhile, we're here, Americans, who can't even have daycare. We have to work 2 jobs because we don't get any assistance. We have to pay for our childbirths. They don't. We have to pay for all their doctor's visits. We have to feed them. We don't have any babysitters or anybody to watch them for free like illegal immigrants do, because boomers didn't sign up to be a grandma or grandpa and don't want anything to do with our kids or pass their wealth or, help out in any way. And so it's a complete rigged system. And eventually, and for us, there's a lot of, these companies want to pay us less, or, with inflation, they don't want to pay us anymore. Why? Because they have these illegals coming in, they're getting paid probably like 50 grand, in assistance a year. And then they're getting paid, the base amount to, keep the cost down for these companies. So they only have to pay like a base pay. And then Americans who don't get that 50 grand a year in assistance, complain, and we're like, we can't even pay our bills. We can't even buy food. It's too expensive. And the companies don't care because they know they'll have Jose or Sanaya or Rabib, who will gladly work and take that position. It's completely unfair, and it's nothing against these people. If I had the opportunity that they do, I would maybe consider it, except for I love my country. All right. I would never leave my country and give up on my country. Okay. And I'm not saying they are, in some cases they are, like, Mexico, I believe a lot of them are running from Mexico, like they should be fixing their country. Okay, when they're saying, "Oh, it's terrible. There's no opportunity," blah blah blah. They have more factories and stuff down there than we do in America. All right, there's really not much in America anymore. It's all tech, which is pretty much a useless career. It's just so replaceable, and just really it's all for entertainment. It's not any really substantial work. It's not like healthcare where you're actually like saving somebody's life. It's not like mechanic where you're actually like fixing somebody's car so they can go to work, or a farm where you're actually like raising food. All these like, essential jobs, and COVID highlighted a lot of that, but I think these tech workers are really starting to realize like how disposable their jobs really are, and it makes sense. Like, what do you expect? Like, you're like, you're getting paid an insane amount, for literally just like sending emails all day, and making some computer like program, which is so quickly replaced, and it's not like a specialty like other career fields are that like are essential. Like, eventually people aren't going to care about media. They're not going to care about their banks stealing money from them. People are going to start demanding cash. They're going to be like, no, I'm skinning this cat. I don't want my bank siphoning money from me, billing me, taking money from me. Like, for example, I had so much fraud on my account lately, and this it's through my bank. They're supposed to protect my money, and then I have to wait multiple days or weeks to get it all fixed. And sometimes when it happens, it's when my bills hit. So then all my money's in the bank, my bills hit, then I get late fees from all of my direct deposits, and the bank doesn't even care. They're not going to reimburse me for these late fees. They're not going to like pay my bills to say sorry for the fraud that they're supposed to protect. And I tell these people, like, the old days are coming back. Cash is king, or gold, or barter and trade. Because I even told the rep at my bank, I'm like, dude, this is happening every 6 months. I'm spending time to do this. I'm spending literally 8 hours to fix all this stuff each time I get fraud. That's 8 hours of work. Whatever my hourly rate is, that's hundreds of dollars, for that. On top of all the late fees. It's extremely expensive. And when food is like quadruple, almost like 6 times the amount it was 10 years ago, you're going to cut costs wherever you can. These banks are just out of their mind, where, and I get back to when I, told the rep, I'm like, back in the old days when you had cash, somebody would have to steal it from you. Somebody would have to forcefully come to you and steal your money. Now it's so simplified. You got these, nerds that are hacking people's account. They're doing these fraud things. A lot of them are from different countries. And they don't have to, it's a lot easier. They don't have to point a gun to your head to steal your money, They're just hacking it, stealing it, leaving you high and dry. Where, like, in the past, I guarantee you there was less armed robberies, because armed robberies are pretty much the same as fraud on your account. They're pretty much equal to an armed robbery, except for it's in a different form. And now there's so much fraud. I guarantee you, ask anybody out there, have you had fraud on your account? Yes, I love. I mean, it's so prevalent. Almost everybody's had fraud. So if you think about it, the only way for you to have fraud back in the day is if, you buy something at hand and it's the wrong thing. Somebody steals it from you or tricks you. Or if somebody points a gun and says, give me your money, and whatever cash you have on hand. or if you had it in your house in a house fire or whatever. But again, um, the amount of fraud compared to back in the day when you had just cash, I mean, it doesn't even make sense at all. And the time you waste to like clear all this fraud, it's just such a stupid system. And you got these boomers who like they're just stuck on stupid. They can't even think about um, how this new way is not good. And the bottom line is it's the end. There's no coming back from this. All right. And that's why I believe all these wars are happening, is because the government knows there isn't anything left to make profits. They're complaining about, oh, we have record profits and the stock market's really high. Yeah, well, the people don't have record profits. That's the most important indicator. It doesn't matter, how low you pay your employees to increase your profits. That's not profit. That's cheating. That's stealing. All right? And it's just obnoxious how these boomers try to manipulate reality. And it's crazy how many people just don't know basic math, And one of the biggest things that you'll get from a boomer is, oh, it was worse back in our day. Interest rates were 20%. All right. 20% off of what? A $60,000 townhouse? How much is that? 10 grand? 5% of $500,000, which is how much a townhouse is today, and they're not even made as well. And that's what? 50 grand? 50 grand from a $500,000 house? I'm pretty sure that's 5%. And it's like 6-7%. So like you could call that like 60-70,000. Now this is a rough estimate. I didn't get my calculator out, but so actually the interest rates back in the day were actually a lot less than they are right now. It's just manipulation of math, and a lot of people can't math, so they just look at the face value and they're just like, oh, 20% is more than 5%. Must have been worse. No, it really wasn't, And their pay wasn't really that far off, in the 90s, early 2000s. I remember my dad, he was getting paid, 20 an hour or so doing construction. And I think even a little bit more. So like that's comparable to today. So wages really haven't gone up that much. And the cost of living has, it's hyperinflation. And like these people think, oh, it's nothing, it's not, it's inflation, but it's not the worst we've ever seen. This is the worst we've ever seen, ever. All right? Worse than the Great Depression, ever. At least back then, they had stuff that was built for a reasonable price in America with hardened steel made in America that would last forever. All right? You'd buy it one time and that's it. You could buy a beautiful house, and pay it off in 1 year, and live. All right? And people worked back then, they worked for fun. They worked for enjoyment. Nowadays, we work because we have to. We don't have a choice. All right? Our bills are so high, especially these retards that are buying these single family houses for like $1 million, and they got a 2-person income. Like, what are you going to do when your wife divorces you? Because it's going to happen. There's no long-lasting marriages these days. All right? It's not going to happen. And then how are you going to, you're going to have to sell the house. You think you're going to get that much out of it? You might get $600,000 for it because the materials in it isn't worth $1 million. The land that you get right next to a nosy neighbor, you know, that's looking through his window, through your window, is not going to be as much money as you put into it. You know, that's what you're putting all of your marbles in. You know, some 0.001 acre of land. You know, that's what you have to show for with a toothpick house that could blow over if, you know, if there was any kind of, you know, small tornado. I mean, like, I live in a cabin, a log cabin from 1850s, and this thing's still standing, and this thing's strong. And if there was ever, I mean, it's a defensive cabin too. I mean, these big logs, I mean, if somebody shot through my house, it's not going to go through these logs, all right? I mean, even the middle has like these wood blocks in it. I'll show you. Even in the chinking, there's these wood blocks here, all right? So if somebody shot through one of these modern houses, it's going to go through like Swiss cheese. And, you know, it's an example of how America has changed. And again, our biggest threat is illegal immigration. They're siphoning and sucking and draining every little penny that we have that should be going into Americans' pockets. Healthcare is so busy. I call it international healthcare in America, because everybody comes here to get treated because they know they'll get it for free. Every hospital, at least in most states, has an allotment of millions of dollars. They have to give away. It's like 5 or 10% of all their profits each year to people who don't have insurance. All right, by law. So a lot of these are nonprofits too. Most of them are nonprofits. So when people say, "Oh, it's a nonprofit, it's great," no, it's not. You know, they're charging you triple, quadruple what the price should be, all to compensate for people who don't have insurance. You know, but they're getting all this cash assistance on the side. They're having 100 kids. You know, my life must be great. And I'm sure it is. And that's why they're sticking around. That's why they're here. You know, it's like a paradise. It's a great replacement. So, you know, I'll talk more about this issue. I don't want to go on too much longer, but, you know, that's my rant for the day. And again, this mask isn't for COVID. It's to disguise my identity, because, I mean, it's just a tough world out there. You can't trust anybody. And, you know, if I ever make it famous, maybe I'll show my identity, but I have too much going on to show my identity. And it would be stupid, okay? I don't know why half these people, you know, talking about the stuff they do, just willy-nilly show their face. Like, it's just stupid. But anyways, I hope you'll like my video. I got some more coming out, so just stay tuned, and don't forget to like, comment, subscribe.